Ode to Lumopolis was quite easily not only the best event story, but the best story in all of Alchemy Stars so far. For so long, since the beginning of this game, we wanted to know what happened with the Swartz family, and although Part 1 gave us answers to our questions, Part 2, Edge of Collapse, showed us that there was a lot more that went on behind the scenes. This family didn't necessarily start off with a fairy tale love story. There was a lot going on before we knew anything, and there was more trials with the family than we knew, particularly with how Joshua was actually an assassin going after Daniel's father. First, a quick recap about all that went down in Part 2. In Part 2, our cast found themselves in a time loop when trying to exit the crystal. Confused as to why they couldn't get out, it turns out that the Joshua that they thought was a part of the illusion turns out to be the genuine Onoychenkomusic, who's been trapped within the crystal all this time, and that she's been split into two personas, her original and the monster who attacked them in Part 1. This is due to having a seed planted in her after saving Mia, and in order not to fully turn herself into an eclipse site, she trapped herself within the crystal ball, where her two personas were at war with one another and split. After explaining everything, the game split up because Joshua told them that they needed to defeat the monster before they could leave. But unfortunately, this was all a trap, as the Joshua we thought was the good one turned out to be manipulating things behind the scenes, and the monster was the original who slowly turned, thus having our cast thrown into a continuous loop of fighting off the evil Joshua and getting her original self out of the crystal ball along with them. This event was absolutely incredible. While Part 1 gave us more in-depth character on Daniel and Mia, Part 2 gave us a more look into the woman that meant so much to them. I mean, here we are thinking Joshua was a pure kindred soul that Daniel fell for, but that was apparently a front she put on in the beginning, as at the start of their relationship, this woman was from Lower Lumopolis and trained as an assassin, out to get Daniel's father, who was the city lord at the time, and her connection with her brother Caleb also being a front, taking the place of his actual sister who died during an anti-rebel operation, as well as his mother. That tragedy caused Caleb's father to adopt the Joshua that we know, who lost her real parents, having her take the place of his deceased daughter with the goal of assassinating the city lord at the time. Joshua was a far more interesting character than what we originally were shown, as he was someone who turned out to be quite the more dangerous figure than what we expected. Finding out that she had a seed implanted in her, her personality had split into two sides, just like Mia. One was a caring wife and mother, the other a cold-hearted assassin, and yet both are part of the same person, a battle that Joshua was constantly struggling with within herself, unlike with Mia, who was able to befriend her other personality, Baba Yaga. Joshua was truly an interesting character, way more than we realized. Finding out that she was an assassin and even having taught Miss Blanc really goes to show that not everything is always as it seems. I mean, once again, this goes back to a struggle of power within the government of Lumopolis. Just like Daniel, his father wanted Lumopolis to strive like a utopia, but his methods and approach towards that goal led to some undesirable outcomes. That led to those like Joshua losing people that was precious to them, and giving rise to a new blade to be pointed at the House of Swartz. And yet, even though this relationship didn't start in the fairy tale manner we believe, it's no question that both of them grew to care for one another. Now, I'm a man that likes to read himself some romance stories every now and then, so I can easily tell you that I felt invested into Joshua and Daniel, how they grew to care so much for one another, two figures who came from very different backgrounds, ended up seeing the good in each other, to the point where they wanted to be by one side, and make Lumopolis not only a better place for themselves, but for their children and the people they look after. Although this relationship met with challenges that nearly tore them apart, it doesn't change the fact that they genuinely did care for each other, even to this day. And not only did this event did well giving us light on the Swartz family, we also got more into the Kartima family as well, particularly about the prophecy involving Sharona, where she is said to be their savior. We knew that Leona and Sharona didn't have the greatest sibling relationships, with Leona pretty much resenting her sister for being born, as messed up as that sounds. Sharona was prophesied to be someone that would save their family, though we haven't gotten anything yet as to what the exact words of this prophecy. It still manages to be a big deal in the long run. In all honesty, this is probably a tease for another story event in the future. Ode to Lumopolis was pretty much the first time we actually go into some lengths involving dragons. Granted that this is related to Lumopolis, so it would be no surprise for them to be looked at as abominations by those of power. Still, it was interesting to see them for the first time of this caliber. Not like the partners of Vivian and Leona, Dragon seems to hold a very powerful role overall in the lore of Alchemy Stars, enough for even families to tie their existence to them, and for others to see them as a threat. To which goes back to Sirona and what type of role her character will eventually play. Whatever role Sirona is going to play, it's going to be big. In terms of story, this event is our first hint at what's to come. Given to the current situation, it's going to be interesting to see what will happen. After all, Sirona no longer have any involvement with her family, to what we believe, as she's now a Legion commander for the Illumina Federation. But I'm sure we know that's not going to stop her from becoming involved with her family again. Most definitely we'll get a story where she's the focus. How that will play out, we'll have to wait. Not to mention there's still the situation with the Kartima family themselves, and what the current situation is with the rest of the members. What will be interesting if this becomes an involvement with both Lumopolis and Illumina. I mean, if we're being honest, the two factions aren't really the bestest of friends despite everything that has happened. Both have different values that clashes with each other too often. We've seen this plenty both in the main story and in particular the Maidens and the Ruins event. And with Sirona having ties to both, who knows if, however this prophecy goes down, it gets both factions involved. This event definitely gave us a lot to not only process, but to look forward to future content. Not only did we finally get insight on characters that would tease that, but we even have some on those we wasn't expecting to know more about. At least on my end, Ode to Lumopolis was quite the fantastic story, giving us the full picture on the Swartz family especially. I mean, for so long we would tease about what went down and made our beloved characters what they are today. Even though personally, I would have loved to see more appearance of Carlene by the end of it. But I'm sure this won't be the last of the Swartz story, at least while this game continues to run, because this game has so much to offer with its amazing world building and rich lore. Until next time, may the truth bless you.